In the confines of Hermann Göring's Berlin villa, a mysterious figure sits in the darkness. Once marked for death by Hitler himself, he fled Germany with nothing but the clothes on his back. Now he's returned, and from a room once used to plot the annihilation of his people, he leads one of the most secretive U.S. special forces in the world. His men replaced SS uniforms for disguises. Now they pose as traveling salesmen or Turkish construction workers. He sends them to stalk Berlin's streets like ghosts, communicating through dead drops and invisible ink, carrying weapons disguised as cigarette lighters, and silently scuba diving through canals to cross the city's heavily guarded divide. In the shadows of the Iron Curtain, Sidney Shachnow is preparing for World War III. Sidney Shachnow led the everyday existence of any child until the summer of 1941 changed everything forever. When Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union, Lithuania found itself caught in the crossfire. Initially, many Lithuanians greeted the Germans as liberators from Soviet oppression, but this relief was short-lived. Hitler's policy of Lebensraum, or living space, demanded that Eastern European territories be cleared to make room for German settlers. The people already living there, especially Jews like the Shachnow family, would have to be removed. In July 1941, 7-year-old Sidney and his family were given 30 days to relocate to what the Nazis called concentration camp number 4, Kovno, a ghetto that would become home to nearly 40,000 Jews crammed into an area of ramshackled houses. Shachnow would later write, quote, "There were no water pipes, no sewage system, and no access to running water. Not only the brutality of the Gestapo, but the threat of disease was an ever-present terror to the population." For 3 years, young Sidney endured conditions that would break most adults. Looking back on his time in the camp, he said, quote, "You grow up quick, and if you don't grow up quick, you don't survive." He performed heavy manual labor under harsh conditions, watched helplessly as extended family members and friends were slaughtered, and witnessed brutalities that no child should ever see. The camp operated differently from the more notorious extermination camps like Auschwitz, as Shachnow would later explain how Treblinka could eliminate, quote, 12,000 people and get rid of the evidence, the ashes, in a matter of an hour. Our camp did things the old-fashioned way. Of the 40,000 Jews who entered Kovno, only 2,000 would survive. In March 1944, Shachnow faced a horrifying situation. Nazi troops were preparing what became known as the Children's Action, a systemic roundup of all children. But Shachnow's mother, driven by the desperate ingenuity of a parent fighting for her child's life, acted fast. Just days before the roundup began, Shachnow's Uncle Willie helped orchestrate a daring escape. Hidden underneath his uncle's long coat, Sidney synchronized his steps as they walked toward the ghetto gates. When Willie gave the signal, the boy darted from beneath the coat and followed a woman with a red kerchief. She was a contact who risked her own life to rescue prisoners and took them to a safe location. She arranged for Shachnow to hide with a Catholic farming family until he could be reunited with his mother and younger brother, who had also escaped. When Soviet forces liberated Lithuania in August 1944, 10-year-old Sidney had survived what 95% of his fellow prisoners had not. But liberation brought its own harsh realities. The Soviets began implementing communist policies, and the Shachnow family quickly realized they had simply traded one oppressive regime for another. The family that had endured Nazi persecution now faced the prospect of life under Stalin's rule. It was time to flee once again, this time toward the promise of freedom in the West. The Shachnow family's escape from Soviet-controlled Lithuania would become an epic of endurance that tested every survival skill Sidney had learned in the ghetto. It was a 2,000-mile journey across war-torn Europe that would take 6 grueling months, mostly on foot. The family traveled by whatever means they could find, walking, hitching rides on wagons, occasionally boarding trains when possible. The route took them through Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Austria, navigating a continent still reeling from the devastation of World War II. Borders were tight, authorities were suspicious, and displaced persons wandered the roads by the thousands. For a Jewish family without proper documentation, every checkpoint threatened disaster. The journey finally ended in American-occupied Nuremberg, Germany, the very city where Nazi war criminals would soon face justice. For the Shachnow family, Nuremberg represented something else entirely, a chance to survive while they waited for the opportunity to reach America. But life in post-war Nuremberg required resourcefulness and street smarts. With no job, no income, and no organizations to support them. The family had to fend for themselves. 10-year-old Sidney quickly developed what he would later call, quote, a sixth sense and an ability to read people. These skills soon made him successful at something few children could manage. He became a black market smuggler. Working as a courier for American GIs, Shachnow pirated contraband goods, nylon stockings, chocolate, cigarettes, and other luxury items that were worth their weight in gold in the devastated German economy. The same instincts that had kept him alive in Kovno now helped him navigate the dangerous but lucrative world of post-war illicit trading. He learned to move unseen through the city, to identify who could be trusted and who couldn't, and to always have an escape route planned. During these years in Nuremberg, Shachnow also mastered German. The language of those who once sought to exterminate him became a tool for survival. For 5 years, the Shachnow family remained in this liminal state, no longer prisoners, but not yet entirely free either. They were among the millions of displaced persons scattered across Europe, all hoping for visas to America, Palestine, or anywhere that would offer them a chance to rebuild their lives. Finally, in 1950, their persistence paid off. The family obtained the precious documents they'd been waiting for, visas to the United States. At age 16, Shachnow boarded a ship bound for Boston, Massachusetts, carrying little more than the clothes on his back and the hard-won survival skills that had kept him alive through a decade of upheaval. It was in the United States that he would soon find his true calling. At 16, Sidney Shachnow attended school for the first time in his life. The transition was brutal. Despite his intelligence and determination, he struggled with English and found himself academically behind his American-born peers. He worked evenings after school to help support his family financially, but the land of opportunity the United States was sent to represent still felt frustratingly out of reach. Just before graduation, Shachnow made a decision that would define the rest of his life. On January 10, 1955, despite hardly being able to speak English, he walked into a U.S. Army recruiting station and enlisted. For a young immigrant who had experienced rejection and displacement, the military offered something he had never truly had, a place where he could belong. In the Army, Shachnow discovered something remarkable. His fellow soldiers didn't care about his accent or his past. They cared about whether he could do the job. And Sidney could do the job exceptionally well. His survival instincts and physical toughness served him perfectly in military training. The discipline and hardship of boot camp felt like home to someone who had endured forced labor as a child. As Shachnow embraced his new life as an American soldier, he also announced his plans to marry his high school sweetheart, Arlene Armstrong, a Roman Catholic. However, his parents were devastated by his decision, seeing it as an abandonment of their heritage after everything they'd endured to preserve their family. But Sidney, shaped by his experiences as a young man in America, stood firm. He told them bluntly, quote, "Join the new world. America, the melting pot. Have you even taken a step into this world? You both live in the past." As he saved money, married Arlene, and began building the American life he dreamed of during those long years in European displacement camps, Shachnow rose steadily through the enlisted ranks, earning the respect of his peers and superiors. By 1960, he reached the rank of Sergeant First Class in the 4th Armored Division and had become a U.S. citizen, a moment of profound personal triumph. With citizenship came opportunity. Shachnow entered officer candidate school as an Army infantry officer on April 12, 1960. The young man who had arrived in the United States unable to speak English now commanded American soldiers. But Shachnow's ambitions reached even higher. In 1962, the Army began recruiting for an elite new unit that would become legendary, the Green Berets. The U.S. Army Special Forces represented the pinnacle of military excellence, soldiers who could operate independently, think creatively, and accomplish the impossible under the most challenging conditions. Shachnow volunteered immediately. When asked later about his decision-making philosophy, he would explain, quote, "I had many opportunities in the military, and when opportunity knocks, you get up off your ass and open the door." The training was punishing. Shachnow would recall, quote, "It was hard before you start. It's like climbing a mountain. When you're at the bottom, it's difficult. When you're on top, looking down, it's not too bad." For someone who had survived the Holocaust and crossed a continent on foot, Special Forces training was just another mountain to climb. Before long, Shachnow had earned his Green Beret and the rank of captain. Now, it was time for him to show what he could do. As Cold War tensions escalated and America's involvement in Vietnam deepened, Captain Sidney Shachnow received orders that would test everything he had learned in Special Forces training. In 1965, he was given command of Detachment A-121 and deployed to An Long, a remote outpost along Vietnam's Mekong River near the Cambodian border. The assignment placed Shachnow and his team in one of the most dangerous regions of South Vietnam, where they would conduct sabotage missions, reconnaissance operations, and search and rescue efforts deep behind enemy lines. Operating in small numbers against a determined enemy who knew the terrain intimately, the Green Berets faced constant danger from Viet Cong forces who could strike without warning and disappear back into the jungle. During his first tour, in a fierce firefight with Viet Cong troops in the depths of the Vietnamese jungle, Shachnow was simultaneously shot in both his leg and arm. For most soldiers, such wounds would mean immediate evacuation. But Shachnow had not survived the Holocaust and built a military career by accepting defeat. Despite the excruciating pain and blood loss, Shachnow applied tourniquets to both wounds and continued fighting. More importantly, he continued leading his men, ensuring they maintained their positions and could extract safely from the contact. His primary concern was not his own survival, but making sure that every man under his command made it out alive. This extraordinary display of leadership under fire earned him his first Silver Star and Purple Heart. But Shachnow's ordeal was far from over. While recovering from his combat wounds, military doctors diagnosed him with a collection of illnesses that had become grimly familiar to Vietnam veterans: tuberculosis, typhoid fever, and several other diseases endemic to Southeast Asia. For many soldiers, such a combination of combat wounds and serious illness would have meant the end of their military career. Instead, Shachnow used his recovery time productively. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska, balancing his studies with his rehabilitation. The Army promoted him to major, recognizing both his combat performance and his commitment to professional development. Remarkably, he couldn't even attend his own graduation ceremony. He'd received orders for his second deployment to Vietnam. This time, Shachnow was assigned to the legendary 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, where he would serve alongside paratroopers renowned for their aggressive tactics. His second tour proved even more dangerous than his first, with multiple close calls that nearly cost him his life. Yet through it all, Shachnow displayed the same calm leadership and tactical acumen that had made him legendary among his peers. He earned a second Silver Star for gallantry in action, cementing his reputation as one of the most capable and courageous officers in the Special Forces community. By the time Shachnow completed his second tour in Vietnam, he'd established himself as an exceptional combat leader who could be trusted with the most sensitive and dangerous missions. His combination of tactical brilliance, personal courage, and unwavering commitment to his men had caught the attention of senior military leaders. They would soon offer him an assignment that would define the rest of his career and place him at the very heart of the Cold War's most dangerous flashpoint. In the early 1970s, Sidney Shachnow received orders for an assignment so classified that its very existence would remain secret for decades. He was to return to Germany to command Detachment A, a clandestine unit of elite special forces operating under the cover of the U.S. Army's Berlin Brigade. They were to stand ready 24 hours a day in case of the outbreak of World War III. If Soviet forces ever invaded West Berlin or launched a broader attack on NATO, Shachnow and his men would activate immediately. They would cross into East Germany dressed as civilians, carrying false IDs, and conduct a stay-behind campaign of sabotage and guerrilla warfare. Their targets included railways, communication networks, military headquarters, fuel depots, and any infrastructure that could support a Soviet advance. Everyone involved with Det A understood the brutal reality. This was a mission that would not be expected to survive. Capture undoubtedly meant torture and execution at the hands of the KGB or East German secret police. There would be no rescue, no prisoner exchanges, no hope of survival if they were caught. Yet these men volunteered anyway, knowing that their sacrifice might buy precious time for NATO reinforcements to arrive and save Western Europe from communist conquest. The composition of Detachment A itself embodied the complex realities of Cold War geopolitics. Many of Shachnow's men were Eastern European immigrants who had joined the U.S. Army through the Lodge-Philbin Act, seeking American citizenship while bringing invaluable language skills and cultural knowledge. Some were former German soldiers, including ex-members of the Waffen-SS, who now served the United States against communist forces. These men taught their American teammates essential tradecraft: how to blend in as locals, how to communicate through dead drops and invisible ink, how to move through a city saturated with enemy spies without detection. As part of their top-secret operations, the men under Shachnow's command carried cigarette lighter guns, known as stingers, and posed as everything from Turkish guest workers to union plumbers to traveling magicians. They acquired safe houses through German contacts, prepared vehicles with false license plates, and maintained constant readiness for activation. Det A carried out some of the most dangerous missions of the Cold War. The detachment's Team 1 Scuba discovered that Berlin's extensive canal system provided an effective infiltration route into East Berlin. Moving through the waterways using specialized diving equipment, they could penetrate deep into communist territory and return undetected, a skill that proved invaluable for intelligence gathering and target reconnaissance. Nevertheless, the psychological pressure was immense. They lived double lives in a city where a single mistake could expose not just themselves, but the entire operation. To complicate matters further, the Americans shared responsibility for the defense of West Berlin with their British and French counterparts, while the West German police also maintained their own intelligence operations. With all four nationalities conducting clandestine activities, often without informing one another, it's perhaps unsurprising that this complex situation sometimes led to confusion, overlap, or outright blunders. In 1971, a Det A team was scouting penetration areas through the Berlin Wall, only to be spotted and arrested by wary British sector authorities. Though they were released after a few hours, once the Berlin Brigade leadership vouched for their identity, the incident showed how close they were to disaster. Had it been Soviet or East German forces who'd captured them, the outcome would have been unthinkable. 3 years later, the risks for Det A became even more apparent. In the spring of 1974, Detachment A prepared for a high-stakes training mission with the Berlin Police Counterterrorism Unit. The scene involved a covert American team that would sabotage the city's waterworks in a mock assault. But in the mock scene, the game was rigged. The Germans, tipped off, had packed the facility with extra officers waiting in the shadows. When Det A moved in, the night erupted in a storm of muzzle flashes, blanks, but fired with real intent. Forced back under the barrage, the Americans withdrew into the streets. A 3-man American Overwatch team scrambled into a civilian Fiat to escape. They turned a corner and hit a dead end. 2 buses screeched in, spilling dozens of Berlin police into the road. More blank gunfire rattled the alley walls. It was a large-scale shootout. Then came the wild card. The British Provost Marshal, seeing the firefight, believed it was a real one. They saw the 3 English-speaking men fighting a horde of enemy fighters, and they believed British agents had been pinned down by terrorists. British military police, armed with live rounds, rolled in. One wrong move, and the drill would turn into a massacre. In the end, no one was hurt, but the arrests, confusion, and public headlines left all sides humiliated. Especially the men of Det A, whose existence was supposed to be top secret, but now their faces were plastered on the front pages of local newspapers. As Detachment A's commanding officer, Shachnow was assigned quarters in a villa that had ironically once belonged to Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command, and had served as headquarters for Fritz Reinhardt, the Nazi finance minister. A Holocaust survivor was now living in the homes of the very men who had orchestrated his family's persecution. On one occasion, Shachnow found himself seated across from his old Soviet counterpart and senior KGB officers at a diplomatic dinner. As the evening progressed, the Russians began laughing among themselves. When Shachnow asked what they found so amusing, they replied, quote, "Here you are, a Jew. You were liberated by us, the Russians. Now you are defending the Germans who had incarcerated you and committed atrocities against your people, while you are getting ready to fight us, your new enemy." Throughout his time with Det A, Shachnow led men who had volunteered for what he later called a mission requiring, quote, "incredibly talented people willing to make the ultimate sacrifice." They trained continuously, updated their target lists, and maintained the equipment caches hidden throughout Berlin, knowing that any day might bring the order to cross into East Germany on their final mission. Such was their expertise in urban warfare and sabotage that when Delta Force was being formed, many Det A veterans were recruited to help establish America's premier counterterrorism unit. Men from the unit even participated in Operation Eagle Claw, the failed 1980 attempt to rescue American hostages in Iran, with Det A operators conducting pre-mission reconnaissance in Tehran under the codename Stormcloud. Reflecting on Detachment A later in life, Shachnow would conclude, quote, "No force of its size in history has contributed more to peace, stability, and freedom. The unit was finally deactivated in 1984, but the Berlin streets where it had cut its teeth would provide the setting in one more chapter of Sidney Shachnow's life. By the late 1980s, Sidney Shachnow had risen to the rank of Major General, reaching the pinnacle of his military career. He commanded the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School at Fort Bragg, overseeing the training of America's elite special forces. His rise from Holocaust survivor to two-star general represented the ultimate American success story, and it wasn't over yet. In 1989, Shachnow received orders that would complete the most remarkable circle imaginable. He was returning to Berlin, this time as the overall commander of all American forces in the city. The boy who had once been powerless in a Nazi concentration camp was now the senior U.S. military officer in the former heart of Hitler's Reich. The historical irony was profound and deeply personal. He would later put it into words, quote, "Here it is, the very capital of fascism and the Third Reich. The very buildings and streets where they were goose-stepping and Heil Hitlering, and the very system that put me in the camp and killed many people. Here we are, 40-some-odd years later, and I come back to be commander of American forces in that city, and a Jew on top of that. It sort of adds insult to injury, doesn't it?" As Shachnow settled back into his command in Berlin, the communist world was beginning to crumble around him. Soviet Union, weakened by economic collapse and political upheaval, was losing its grip on its Eastern European satellite states. On November 9, 1989, the impossible happened. After 28 years as the ultimate symbol of Cold War division, the Berlin Wall began to fall. East German authorities, overwhelmed by massive protests and confused by mixed signals from Moscow, announced that border crossings would be opened. Within hours, jubilant crowds were attacking the concrete barrier with hammers, pickaxes, and bare hands. From his command post, Shachnow watched as history unfolded before his eyes. The city where he'd prepared for a suicide mission against Soviet forces was now celebrating the peaceful collapse of communist tyranny. As crowds cheered and danced on the rubble of the wall, Shachnow reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. After witnessing the fall of the Berlin Wall and overseeing the peaceful transition as Germany began reunification, Shachnow continued serving until his retirement in 1994. He'd spent almost 40 years in uniform, 32 of them as a Green Beret, rising from private to Major General. Shachnow always credited hard work and the opportunities America provided as the catalysts of his successes. In retirement, Shachnow felt compelled to preserve his extraordinary story for future generations. In 2004, he published his autobiography, Hope and Honor, a memoir of a soldier's courage and survival. The book revealed secrets he'd kept for decades and shared lessons learned throughout a lifetime of service. As he wrote in the preface, quote, "I found it painful, and I wasn't sure anyone would believe me." Major General Sidney Shachnow's extraordinary service earned him recognition that few soldiers receive. In 2007, he was inducted as a distinguished member of the Special Forces Regiment, an honor reserved for those who embody the highest ideals of America's elite warriors. His military decorations told the story of a lifetime of courage: 2 Distinguished Service Medals, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and numerous other awards that struggled to capture the full scope of his contributions. Yet for those who served under Shachnow's command, the medals and official recognition paled in comparison to the personal impact he had on their lives. Bob Carest, a veteran of Det A who served under Shachnow twice, captured the sentiment of many when he said, quote, "He stood out throughout his career. He's quite an icon among Special Forces troops." Colonel Aaron Bank, known as the father of the Green Berets, called Shachnow, quote, "a determined, dedicated, dyed-in-the-wool Special Forces officer." Coming from the man who founded the Special Forces, this was perhaps the highest praise a Green Beret could receive. On September 27, 2018, Sidney Shachnow passed away peacefully at his home in Southern Pines, North Carolina, age 83.